chose this topic because we talked about the genocide or something like that. Genocide, war crimes, atrocities, all of that things and how to. As Comrade Stalin said, to kill one man is just a crime, but to kill millions is just statistics. But if you kill the millions, you remain irresponsible because you're a statesman. This is one of the biggest and one of the worst truths of our life. So what I put is just some major questions here, what you can see just on the board. What is usually interesting is how you implement a mechanism of the genocide. Usually people who introduce them, they don't exist any execution personnel. Never, because we are too scared. We delegate power. So if we take, for instance, so what is it indeed? Well, I found just in some definitions of that, how I can play the Cambridge Dictionary. It's a very short, as you can just as I pointed out, this genocide is the murder of a whole group of people, especially a whole nation, race, or religious group. Today we can add some more and more groups, but it means a very short definition of that. But we eliminate someone. On the other hand, a Polish lawyer, Rafał Lemkin, wrote a very interesting book, Axis Rule in Occupied Europe. But the book was written in the United States in 1944, so he analyzed profoundly that. And that is very important. What he wrote about it is coordinated activity, because genocide should be coordinated. Someone should be in charge, should be responsible. So it's like, I put here colonne de l'enfer. Am I correct in my thank you. I don't know, that's very nice. So it is something like there were special troops. The columns are for the Colonne dell'Inferno, the Vendée, or Reichssicherheitshauptamt. That is a special headquarters for, it is in Nazi Germany in the Third Reich. That was headquarters for national security. So they delegated the power. So for instance, that was coordinated activity, like we have Vendée conference in Germany in 1942, 20th of January, where Heydrich, he was Obergruppenführer SS in the SD, especially Sicherheitsdienst, this is a special service. And on the other hand, he coordinated everything, he delegated power. So what is an aim of that? Is destruction of ethnic or national groups' extermination. But it will be destruction, but then it could take a long term. It's a long-term plan. Not necessarily going to kill all the people immediately. But to kill the people immediately on a massive scale, well, it is. But on the other hand, they usually fight. It's like we have the Bolsheviks, for instance. But they killed 25,000 of Polish officers in 1940. And for instance, they said, what a duty that was. We used to kill them in the night, but you see, we changed all the guns to kill one by one. And later, we got drunk. So this is something you must, as always, they know that those people who are delegated the power is something that they suffer mentally for that. They are not normal. I mean, normal people wouldn't commit to that, just any kind of genocide. But it's justified. When it's delegated power is justified, so it can be just in light of law, but it can be set up. And disintegration of political and social institutions, culture, language, everything which can be eradicated. This is genocide. But you want to just eradicate everything. And so on a minor scale, where we saw just that was like Bosnia-Herzegovina. But if we take just, for instance, elimination of tribal versus atrocities, but it was premeditated as well. Rwanda, 1994. In 3 months, 900,000 people with hatchets. So it takes some time, but you kind of feud on that, and you destroy the other tribe, and Hutu and Tutsi. So you must eradicate everything, even just the language, economic existence, whatever. Indeed, when we have a UN definition, is just intention to destroy in whole and in part the national, ethnic, racial, religious groups as such, killing members of the group. Serious bodily or mental harm of members of the group. But it's very important that all the definitions we have a deliberately inflicting the group conditions. But deliberately, this means that is premeditated. That is another point. I put just several things, but we have atrocities of genocide, because first recorded atrocities in really Vendée, 1793-94. But I only have some sort of atrocities which were, I put several examples of it. Athens versus Melas is the Athenians in the Peloponnesian War. it's 5th century BC, late 5th century BC, is something that they killed 1,500 men, slaughtered them, because they offered peace or something, they abstained, so they were killed. Carthage, this is our Third Punic War. A Third Punic War, when we know this is recorded, about 50,000, from 200,000 people, 50,000 only survived. Carthage is where is Tunisia now. Tunis is just the town. So about 150,000, but it's not recorded, it's only that we have some estimation. That was like atrocities, because it was not premeditated. You give just the troops, give them permission to slaughter. It depends on the commander, but it's not premeditated, just meticulously, like a typical modern genocide. Or Jewish-Roman War, when we have about the Arab rebellion in Judea and in Palestine. And indeed, so they slaughtered Jews, and some cities were completely deprived of Jewish community, and just Jerusalem, about 90% of the population was slaughtered. But this is something like a punishment. And we have a crusade against Albigenses. Who knows who were Albigenses? 13th century, that was something like a new, how I would say, it was not a reformation, a new and completely different interpretation of the Bible and Christianity. There were Languedoc in France. Is it good Languedoc? It's pronunciation in France. So there were so-called the Catars. And the Pope delegated the power, so they slaughtered 1 million people. Why? Because the church wanted to be a homogeneous war. But that was closer to what we understand as a genocide. 30 Years' War in Europe, but a 30 Years' War was territory of Germany. Germany was not united. Germany was united 1871. So before, Germany was just after Treaty of Westphalia, there were more than 400 different countries, duchies, and so on. But all the 30 Years' War was on German territory. So what do we know about 4.5 to 8 million victims? So the German population declined by 50%, but it recovered very quickly. But on the other hand, atrocities were on an enormous scale, and really enormous scale. But we have something like Belgium Congo. Leopold II is considered to be just responsible for that. But that was some sort of, as a delegation of power, it was not genocide. That was something like a colonial attitude. And they really behaved in a very uncivilized manner. But it is estimated the span is 1.5 million to 8 million. So it's pretty large span. Herero and Namakwa in Namibia. Germany responsible, 120,000 people in Namibia. Namibia was a German colony. And that was so-called the West German Africa. Indeed, that is for the first time that they eradicated just the tribes. What about the modern genocide that we have? And it's just, this is important. The First and the Second World War includes genocide, because it includes everything. Genocide, atrocities, war crimes, and the war crimes we have just law, which is 1856 through Geneva Convention still, 1992 and 2002 is International Criminal Court in Rome. And the crimes against humanity, which was introduced in 1997. On the other hand, if we have 40 million died in the First World War, and how to consider, for instance, using chemical weapons and poisonous gases, and for the first time to hit civilians as well on a minor scale. But the Second World War, they hit about the 50 to 60% civilians, and about 60 million people died. Out of them, everything was included in the Second World War. One thing. So, on the skip to French Revolution, I'll put just a few photographs of gentlemen who really thought about very funny. All of them were death sentenced. None of them survived the revolution. Revolution usually, if you start a revolution, revolutionary approach is something that you're going to make a quick change when your country on the world. Maximilien Robespierre, who was guillotined in 1794. Jean-Paul Marat, he was Swiss actually. He spent some time in England, and he came to France, and he wanted just to social purchases. So for the first time we have some sort of social engineering. Jean Jatin, who was just moderate as a politician, and one aristocrat who was extremely bloody, Louis-Antoine de Saint-Just. Saint-Just was not his name. Saint-Just was a holy justice. It can be translated like that. But all of them So when we have a guillotine, I took a liberty just to put the symbol of the French Revolution. The head was usually shown to the public. That was so the public had fun seeing their head, the chopped head. So what about the French Revolutionary ideology, the ideology of guillotine, we might say? The guillotine became a symbol of the French Revolution. There was even a caricature, the Robespierre guillotine as a whole, France. For the first time that we have a declaration of the rights of the man and of the citizens, Déclaration des droits de l'homme et du citoyen. And what does it mean? We have a three principles which was introduced as liberté, égalité, et fraternité. So we think about égalité is something like first, the liberté, that every man, every human being has the right to live and consists of being able to do anything that does not harm others. So it's something like you are free until your freedom doesn't harm the freedom of the other people. Égalité, egalitarian society, that everyone, all of the people are equal in the light in front of law. Before, the French society was different because we had aristocracy, we have just the church or clergy, that's just about all of them. They represented about 3 to 4%, and tiers, so it's just a so-called, and it could be working class, peasants, urban class, and so on and so on. And fraternité, how it was. And the fraternité we have just a paper way to what we have a modern citizenship like that. So before fraternité meant that it was a community, Christian community. And Christianity was under the dome of a church, and of course that was the king who was the first one, but that was considered to be fraternité. But what we have, the concept was based indeed, the ideology of French Revolution was based on the concept of French philosophers, that could be Voltaire, Rousseau, Diderot, and so on. But indeed here we have a John Locke's concept, which means natural right, or there are three natural rights like life, liberty, and property. Then the French Revolution introduced just a private property, which was sanctioned by law. But fraternité understood in different ways. Barrère, who stated that every Frenchman is today your brother until he openly shows himself to be a traitor to the fatherland. So what we have inclusive and excluded citizenship. Therefore, if we don't like a social class, we have to just refer to purges. Social engineering was a little bit maybe too extreme. But for the first time that we have a law, and you have a law. This is point 9 of the Declaration of Rights of the Man and Citizen, that stipulated that everyone has a right to defend himself in front of a tribunal, in a court. And indeed, it was suspended. Suspended, this means that until we get rid of all the scoundrels from the country and traitors, we cannot use this point. When you suspend a point, this is just ideological apparently, because social purchase is very important. Very enacted, of course, the constitution like a French republic. The first one, the constitution was not a republican one, but I mean, just they introduced republic, which is this anti-clericalism was the symbol and pillar of ancien regime. So what they did, they changed the calendar even. They wanted to get rid of the past completely, eradicate the past, and to create a new type of a man, and to create completely new reality. This, in the name of human rights, for the first time that we have the regime of terror, the tool of a revolution. Terror is required, and thanks to Robespierre, it was later introduced by Hitler, and later introduced by Stalin. Permanent terror. When you live with permanent terror, because we have to be vigilant, and we have to get rid of our enemies. Who is the most important enemy? Is the enemy within, not enemy outside. What Comrade Stalin even said. Comrades, this is not important who is against us openly, because we know him. But you must find an enemy within. It could be your neighbor, your parents, because they might think in some sort of diverse version, so you have to denounce them. But Robespierre said about terror, because he introduced, and he became a victim of terror, is terror without virtue is murderous. Terror and virtue, we understand in completely different ways. But virtue without terror is powerless. So to introduce virtue, you must implement terror. And then, terror is nothing else than swift, severe, and indomitable justice. When terror is justice, so you legalize terror. Terrorism is quite different, because we understand terrorism in a different way. Terror is something like to make a completely inside out, just a social purchase, as I said. In Robespierre's understanding, when you legalize terror, that means that terror can be legal because law has nothing in common with morality. Law is an order, and nobody pays attention to morality. But to get rid of all the enemies, we have to legalize that. So give us some time until we get rid of all of them. The first recorded genocide was in Vendée. Well, it was in Vendée indeed. They wanted to recruit more than 300,000 people from Vendée, and who rebelled in Vendée? There were peasants, so the representatives of the third tiers, which was just the social ring, the third social ring, and church, because peasants supported the church. And there were just a special troops sent to Vendée, and that was so-called the Republican Crusade. About 117,000 people were in extremely cruel manner exterminated, and if we take out of the 815 populations, every seventh person, they were just the atrocities on an enormous scale. But if we take the regime de la terreur, is 16,500 persons to be executed, and they were suspended Article 9. So the guillotine worked permanently, not only in Paris, but in the small villages, and permanently. So that was some sort of even, or I should say, astonishment in that time in Europe. Why on such enormous scale? That time on enormous scale, it seems to be. But in modern times we have something like a completely different. Those people were responsible for a completely new approach to that. Karl Marx, Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, Josif Vissarionovich Djugashvili, who was Georgian, Comrade Stalin, and some revisionists, Bukharin and Lev Trotsky. Well, there's something like we have Trotskyism as another version of Bolshevism. What was Marxism? Marxism was the answer for savage capitalism and social Darwinism. So that time what Marx said is, he created his concept, it's a wave of a future. It was just, let's say, a middle of the 19th century, a proletariat revolution in industrial countries, that would be on the global range, because that is a social class concept, or class struggle concept, I'm sorry, and therefore that would be the proletariat dictatorship. And if we have dictatorship, this means that dictatorship is justified because that would be the majority ruling over minority permanently, because majority should prevail always, or would win, like in democracy, but provided one thing: they cannot represent themselves, they must be represented. So who represent them? Us. We represent you, but also on your behalf. This means that this is quite the concept. It shows us, if we use the term dictatorship, is quite just ominous one. And the state of the concept of the total state, the means of production, the state keeps a means of production. So therefore it distributes goods among the people. Leninism is something that Lenin said, no, but it's something like a completely new reality. We must adapt Marxism. And peasantry is a core revolution, not a working class, not urban, it's not a working class, it's here. It's because the working class in the West would be much better doing, because that was a time of European imperialism, so they got, well, much better to do. Richer, so the standard of living would be even much higher. So what we're going to just, we have to work, we have to wait for the moment until in the poor countries, but the revolution would be on a global scale. So therefore, the party should be ruled by professional revolutionaries. Lenin was a professional revolutionary. Actually, his right hand and later was our comrade from our country, was Comrade Dzerzhinsky, who is from nobility, and he hated Russians enormously. And he said, I slaughter all of them. So they eliminated in the Bolshevik Revolution all the upper classes. I mean, aristocracy, Russia had one of the best aristocracy, and even just the system was much milder at the end of the 19th and 20th century than it was before. But indeed, when we have professional revolutionaries, this means that they are designed to create a revolution, to make a revolution, and to make a revolution not only in Russia, but to make a revolution like on a global scale. Marx believed in the revolution on a global scale, the same was Lenin. And a very funny term which was even implemented, centralized democracy, but we use today a term which is funny as well, liberal democracy. Has anyone seen liberal as democracy? Like democracy is democracy, not liberal or coercive democracy. This makes no sense. But on the other hand, capitalism should be overthrown, and might be overthrown only by a revolution, not evolution. So that was inspired. A revolutionary situation was in Russia in 1917. Of course, not Lenin just contributed to that. Lenin was transferred by Germans to Russia via Finland, and to make a revolution so as to get rid of Russian from Entente Cordiale. But Lenin profoundly believed in his mission as a missionary, and he said, when we inspire a revolution in a poor countries, then we have to skip into that. And Stalinism, it was another, even just a more extreme version of that. Stalin grabbed power after Lenin's death, 1924. Indeed, we think about the purest Stalinism could be the turn of the 20s and 30s, but purges and Nevada was in Russia permanently. But mobilization of masses, so we have a society which is mobilized, permanently mobilized for revolution, we're on alert. He believed in the global revolution, although Lenin lost the war against Poland in 1920, we won that war, and then we moved back to the revolution in one country, not just on the global range. Here, Stalin reverted again into a global revolution. Intensification of class struggle, this means that he believed that in capitalism bore the seed of self-destruction. So, on the other hand, there will be imminent clash, unavoidable clash between communism and capitalism, and communism would be a winner one. The concept of the total state is just obvious because we're not on the means of production, but the state took care about all the social spheres of life. The most important was how to get rid of enemies within. We have also the terror, permanent terror in Russia, in the Soviet Union that existed. But in 1937, that started with Yezhov. Centrally planned economy, another case, and that was something that Russia is very powerful. So when we had a heavy industry and collectivization of agriculture, that's what that means. If you collectivize agriculture, you take it out from the private hands, you make it just that you distribute food. And therefore, if we refer to what happened in Ukraine, for the first time when we can see it was premeditated famine in Ukraine. We don't know, we estimate about 2 through 7 million people were starved to death because of a famine, which is purposely done by the party. And what does it mean? Can I ask you now? And it's something like that. That was called in Ukraine Holodomor, is famine. It wouldn't work probably because I don't know. That was something like it was introduced purposely. So what we have, famine. I put just a little bit different data because up to 12 million we don't know, but it's something I found out just a different data. 1,800,000 to 7 million and a half. 7 million and a half is just thinking off. Then Kazakhstan genocide during a great famine, 1,700,000. 1,100,000 Soviets who were executed. And the execution was just a normal thing. It was sort of like a daily event. 6 million were deported. Deportations in the Soviet Union were on a massive scale. When the Soviet Union invaded Poland on the 17th of September 1939, they deported more than 1.5 million people. And what they did, not to mention massacring them, is something like they selected people with upper education, doctors, professors, all the people who could just enjoy a diploma. And then they put them or to Siberia. You were just relocated and you were given just a shovel and to dig your hole. No, not other support, nothing. Or just regular just concentration camps or labor camps. So that was really a harsh time. When we have indeed massive deportations, as I mentioned, from even Baltic states all over the Soviet Union and annexed territories. Altogether, it's estimated that during Bolshevism and Stalinism, there were 36 million people. Some even estimated over 40 million people. It's on an enormous scale. And Stalin is classified the second one. Hitler is classified as about 40 million, responsible for the Second World War. So Hitler is the third one. But those numbers really just, they show us what scale we are talking about. So when we switch into another thing is Nazi. People think that for everything is just what invented Adolf Hitler because he wrote Mein Kampf. No, Mein Kampf is just last chapter of this. But everything we developed with this ideology was folkism. We have just like a German philosopher in the 19th century. In the 19th century, nationalism was very popular. So there was Chamberlain in England, Gobineau in France. That was something, but must have been something with Europe, with European nations, that they are so superior, they conquered the world. But it's something like, in folkism, we have something like a different. Hegel, German philosopher, he said, it's something like a German people, they have a Volksgeist, the spirit of a nation, but we are different. And Fichte, who referred to pre-nation, that was, we are so ancient that we are pre-nation. But the question is that we had a French who contributed, who changed his surname into German, Briticher, but Paul de la Garde. He wanted to introduce a pagan Christianism. The first one to formulate the concept to deport the Jews to Madagascar. It's the 19th century. And Madagascar was very popular. But deport all of them, get rid of all of them from Europe, and deport them to Madagascar. But what is indeed how it was understood, the spirit of the nation? How we classified it as the 19th century? It's only 100,000 people probably that believed in that. But paradoxically, they ruled the world later. I mean, the most powerful economy was in the hands of crazy people, completely possessed. So what do you have? Jews were people who were dangerous. Treitchke said that die Juden sind unser Unglück. Jews is our fight. But it's something bad fight. That is something like, why? Because Jews survived thousands of years, but the characters are fizzleness, emptiness, dryness. And confronting to German people that are from a Nordic nation, and they are people of the light. Tall, blonde, blue eyes, from mystic, so-called Thule Island. Because the Aryans is quite a different story. Aryans it's about the second millennium BC. They crossed the Indus River to India, and some of them immigrated to Iran, so we call them Aryans. But for them, it's just a German nation. That would be, we Germans, we come from Thule Island, the purest. Who was just the best from the society, who was a peasant. A peasant who was clean, not profit-oriented, and who produces food. So a peasant is a Bauer. The world, according to folkism, was divided into upper and lower races. All the lower races, Jews, Gypsies, Appetites, they don't settle, they don't have a settlement, they don't have a country. And Slavs, all of us. So all of us, we are Slavs, we are Slavs, so we should be eliminated because we are inferior. On the other hand, that was very popular in the Austrian-Hungarian Empire as well, because there were many Slavs living there. That was overwhelming majority of the German nation. So another thing that happened in the 20th century, Hitler's opinions were just shaped in the 1920s, just before. He didn't change it. Ideology is not that it changes itself very often. So we have Treitchke. Treitchke was a professor and it was for German colonialism, and he expressed himself against inferior nations and inferior races, because that is something that we are designed just to rule the world. Then we have a Haushoffer. Haushoffer, who he was not the first one. That was Ostada, there was some like a magazine in 19th century, turn of the 19th and 20th century in Germany, but it was Lebensraum, a space for living. But we are a big nation, and we need something like a space for living. But for the first time that we have, and indeed that was the foundation for Nazi ideology, is Rosenberg, the myth of the 20th century. It is something that we have. He repeated many things after Folkism, but he was for enslavement of all non-Aryan races. Germany is designed to enslave the others. The others should work for Germany, for German nation. When Adolf Hitler got power, his book was published, Mein Kampf, in 1926, when he was sentenced. For a couple of years, he spent 9 months in Landsberg. He was in prison, and his ideology was not just, didn't have any space to move back. So what he was anti-Semitism was not because himself he fought so profoundly, but he collected all the pieces from the Folkism. On the other hand, during the First World War, he served on the front line, and he said, why Jews do not, many of them, they do not serve in the army. So that shaped his attitude toward even some sort of a coup de grace from the Western powers. And who was responsible when Germany lost the war? That were Jews. Jewish conspiracy. Global Jewish conspiracy against Germany. So we have to get rid, because they have money. They are good in commerce, good in banking and finance, so we have to get rid of that. And he was anti-Marxist as well, because Marx was Jewish. So therefore, we are against Marxism. Marxism is just the ideology who rules Germany. But that was a competition between communists in Germany and Nazis before he grabbed the power. And new order is required. What Hitler proposed in Mein Kampf is Neue Ordnung, new order. That was something in Japan. Japanese empire would propose a new Asia for Asians, a new order in Asia, because the Japanese were superior to rule over. And the same is something that new order is how to enslave the others. And Germany, which needs a German nation, which needs a Lebensraum, it is something like to settle Germans to the east, not to the south, but to the east. That is a space. Indeed, that is just a passage of that, but that was how premeditated, how just Holocaust was premeditated. Only 2 minutes were devoted to our nation, to Poles, but we were completely inferior. We had to be eliminated as well. So we had just about the lower classes to survive, to serve the Nazi people. And what we have indeed, what we have to sum it up in Nazi is Nazi preferred just as a revolutionary people. The same one, they created a new type of man who is highly motivated to fight for ideology. And especially when we have just like SS or Hitlerjugend, Hitler's youth, and it's something we were meticulously selected to serve. A Nazi statehood, which is a total state, which indeed, but sanctioned private property, because Hitler needs money. On the other hand, so this is quite a difference with Stalinism, if we confront it. Expansionism and racism. Racism was based because in 1935, Germany was the first country to introduce Nuremberg laws to exclude Jews from all the public sector, the public positions. So you couldn't just take up any job if you were Jews. But it's something like how they manufactured that. Only the office, which was won by Göring, only the office and Göring indeed decided who was Jewish, who was not. Because the problem with Nuremberg laws was you were 100% Jew, 75% Jew, 50% Jew, 25% Jew. How you can just, something that is contradictory to that. Is it a physical character, or is it a question of culture, matter of culture? Nobody understood it, but Hitler excluded this population. Although in entire Germany there were about 550,000 Jews. Altogether we wanted to kill all the Europe, to calm Europe and to relegate them to death camps. And many of them were set up by Nazi Germany in Poland, because there's a difference between death camp and concentration camp. So what about the numbers? Holocaust altogether, when we have 6 million people, is how they just manufactured even that. You will just you were allowed to have a 50 marks, Deutsche marks in your pocket, so as to have hope that nothing will happen to you. Einsatzgruppen on the Eastern Front, they executed only with machine guns, those people. Those people in the Eastern Front were not relocated to any concentration camp or death camp place. They were just executed. 5 to 6 million Soviet citizens were killed by Nazi. 1.8 million Poles, Serbs. Serbs is quite different because in Yugoslavia, there were just Orthodox Nazi regimes as well. Ante Pavelic, and they were the worst, probably one of the cruelest. Gypsies, disabled people were started to eliminate from the society. This is an action that was called Operation T4. You had to denounce from your family who was disabled, on who suffered from mental disease, and he was just put in a gas chamber. Total number is about the Nazi genocide. So now the genocide is about 16,370,000. Now another, just the last one, and probably the most curious I did just as a Khmer Rouge in Cambodia. It's something like an eclectism where we have a mixture of Marxists, Stalinism, racism, Maoism, whatever. For the first time, what we have is something like they try to refer to the concept of autarky. Autarky is self-sufficiency. So what do they mean? We're going to barbarize the society until the year 0 and to recreate our culture from the bottom. This means we're going to create the purest Khmer race. And the purest Khmer race, that was somebody who is a peasant, who joined the movement, but on the other hand, the most important thing is that we should be self-sufficient. We learn how to do it by ourselves. But to barbarize society, you have to kill all the people with upper shelf, people, educated people, professors, doctors. I'm not saying that Nazi did with the other nations, but the Khmer Rouge did the same with their own nation. So to exterminate all of them. And for the first time that we have, that was the party leadership, but it was so-called Ankalup, the supreme organization. Nobody knew who was in charge. Nobody knew that. For the first time, we had just a government who ruled the country, but was completely unknown. It was mysterious. That was organization. It's like a mafia. When I have an intellectual roots of the Khmer Rouge, when it comes from Rosa Luxemburg, accumulation of capital and the development of imperialism and exploitation of the poorer countries, like in Africa or like in Asia, and that it skipped into dependism. Dependism is something where you have a core of the most industrialist and developed countries, half rimlands and rimlands, and the rimland has no chance to be promoted to the core because it's always it's being exploited. So it's what we do is we completely isolate ourselves from that system. So the linking is just autarky is. The Khmer Rouge implemented it in a full swing. Autarky we had like in Bani Sadr in Iran, 1980, it failed. Nyerere, the declaration of Arusha, that was in Tanzania, it failed. Sometimes when people claim that in Japan, autarky, that really were the third shogun after Tokugawa Ieyasu implemented that as something like an isolation, but even that was not perfect isolation. And a final solution for Khmer Rouge would be progress by itself. For the first time that we have, because not all of them were educated on Sorbonne in France, but it was Q Sampan, it's Cambodia's economy and industrial development. He defended his PhD, pretty well, and he said, well, yeah, we are an agriculture country, so we recreate ourselves from the bottom. So if we have another man who influenced Khmer Rouge, that was Frantz Fanon. His book was translated to many languages. The wretch of the earth. What does it mean? What he said, the people are suspicious of the townsman. The latter dresses like a European. He speaks the European's language, works with them, sometimes even lives in the same district. So he's considered by the peasants as a turncoat who has betrayed everything that goes to make up the national heritage. The townspeople are traitors and knaves who seem to get on well with the occupied powers and do the best to get on within the framework of the colonial system. Fanon was a very peculiar person because he was French, he was actually Algerian born in Martinique, who later wrote books about the French colonialism, how to fight about something like how to fight colonialism. So what he said, and Khmer Rouge implemented it very quickly. Even you have to kill the people for glasses, because glasses are a symbol of European imperialism, because it is just a European culture. Somebody invented that, not us, so we get rid of that. And the question with the townsmen, and the first thing that they abolished were shoes, because shoes, they cover our feet, and feet are very delicate, very sensitive, and this is invention of the West. A real peasant in Cambodia does not use shoes. He works in a paddy field. So he is just a real. And here is a townsman. The townsmen are degenerated. So anti-city, the ideology was anti-cities, how to empty the city, and they did it. They emptied the cities immediately once they grabbed the power in 1975. So the massive relocation and reshuffle of the people around the country. So people were distributed to different communities. And indeed, they implemented immediately famine on enormous scales before, never was in Cambodia. So the year zero was past, and how to refer to the past. When you have just the year zero, but the past was Cambodian Empire, the 9th through 15th century, how to refer. They didn't touch monuments at all. Indeed, the question was how to use it as a glorious past for us, but simultaneously contradictory. You have a year zero. Recovered territories, because that was aggressive system from Vietnam and from Thailand, and then finally the regime failed. No minorities, exterminate all minorities. So you have the Chams, you have Vietnamese, you had the Chinese minorities, so they eliminated almost all of that. No religion. Why no religion? Because then we have just even Nazi were atheist, Stalin was atheist, French Revolution was atheistic, and as well no religion, because you must believe in a party. The party is a religion itself. The party is not visible like God, because nobody saw the God, but nobody touched it. But it is the party. But the party rules, and you cannot question the party. Rice is a source of our wealth. If we work very hard, we put all the townsmen, degenerated townsmen, we re-educate them through hard working. And this is the purest social engineering. We're going to create, for instance, new type of a man. So there are no marriages, no families. If a families is a party just matches with people to produce children, and to produce a killing machine against our enemies. Terror was a permanent one on enormous scale, so that was something like, that didn't use a persuasive means, never. Unlike Stalinism or Nazi, just to have a propaganda. Here was not a propaganda oriented at all. Of a death, or you live for a party. This is what we have, how we estimate what remained after that. This photo is from Tool slang. Well, Pol Pot used to really teach geography and history, and that was one of Havia's prison when they died. They killed about 18,000 people, but all of them were killed in Chungak, not in this prison. This is from Siem Reap. The killing fields. The term is very well known, but killing fields means that it's really. Cambodia fully is scattered and killing fields, and you can find them everywhere. And not so like today you find it just on the halls, but not at that time. So we have something that we estimate about 900,000 to 1,671,000 people out of 7 million of population at that time. So I don't know how many people just lost their life because of landmines. It was a country which was just plenty of landmines after there was a civil war which broke out in 1970. Just they killed it in only 3 years and 9 months, at random. It was not premeditated, because when we take Pol Pot and the others, how he premeditated that. No, it was just You launch it. Why? And then you have a social purges. Is because inner party members were killed with families. Because the system failed economically. So people starved, but they exported rice. But the rice, even rice production, it failed completely. So it's just to sum it up, to take so what we have is just the common elements of this that we have. These are ideologies, extreme ideologies, they concept, all of them, they just produce the concept of totalitarian state. Modern society living in totalitarian state, highly motivated and devoted to the party of a leader. They created, as a social engineering, new type of a man with high morale. Missionary approach of all these politicians under that, but none of them resisted. If we take Stalin never resisted any execution, Hitler never resisted any execution, and Pol Pot in Cambodia never resisted any execution. Never. He never touched a dead body. Never. I put just the last why Marxism, because Marxism is still alive. Wealthy society drifting toward left ideology, and they appreciate Marxism because people like Marxism. People don't know it, and they think if we are wealthy, we should distribute some good food to the poor. There's only one system in the world, which is a natural one. All the systems of the ideologies, when we put just very artificially just prepared from behind a bench. Capitalism gives something like a solution for a need, like Adam Smith said. We live with exchange of services between ourselves. But we live in a world which is one of the best right now. It's the best time for all of us. So the standard of living is very high, and we don't take care about food. Well, we suffer from obesity, not from malnutrition, except North Korea, so extreme examples of that. But North Korea I couldn't touch because there's some reasons, and that it's a very peculiar case as well. The question is that we live in probably we will be living in 10 years' time in a completely different world. It's not based on ideology, even though we have just an ideology of a way of the future is probably to completely, or to create some sort of, through technology, a different type of man. But you were a different generation than me. So I live in a completely different world. But you use your mobile phones, the internet is quite normal, but you don't know that many times you're just watched. You're being watched. And that is unjust right. And so this is something. Marxism is that people believe in social justice. Marxism is not responsible for needs. Capitalism gave us just something like the highest standard of living. So what you're going to do? Create different needs. So just to sum it up, also all those ideologies we try to make people happy, but it made them. We are just created genocide, atrocities, war crimes, and tragedies for all the people. And this is something like a massive scale. We don't know where well we will live here. Thank you. That's enough.